Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome to my wrap up for December. In the month of December I read a grand total of 3 books, which was a little bit less than I had anticipated reading. I set myself a huge December TBR and then managed to read none of the books that were on it. I don't know whether I had just ground to a reading halt in December or whether the books that I chose were not particularly great for kind of pushing me on with my reading. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm going to talk to you about those 3 books, so let's just jump straight in. The first book that I read in the month of December was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is a retelling of the Queen of Hearts story from Alice in Wonderland, or a version of the Queen's early life and the reasons why she became such a cruel and heartless villain in the story. I had high expectations for this book. I read The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer earlier in the year and absolutely fell in love with it. I loved her writing style, I loved her characters, I loved her plot development, I loved the way that she took classic fairy tale stories and turned them on their heads and made them something else. So I was really expecting something similar from Heartless, and unfortunately it just kind of fell a little bit flat for me, and I can't really work out why. The writing was still really fluid and really easy to get into. I still loved a lot of the characters that Marissa Meyer had created, but there was just something about the storyline that didn't quite work for me. I think the closest that I can come to an explanation is that I just had expected more. I'd expected a different take on the Alice in Wonderland story, and she stuck very closely to the original Alice in Wonderland story, so a lot of the characters were the same, a lot of the setup and the magic systems were the same, with just a few variations, and so it just wasn't at all what I was expecting from the book. It's still a solid read, it's just not the story that I thought Marissa Meyer was going to tell. So basically the Queen of Hearts is called Catherine, and she is a daughter of a very prominent family in Wonderland, and she's been courted and she's expected to marry the King of Hearts. The King of Hearts is kind of a simpering, babbling fool of a king, and Catherine has her own dreams. She wants to open a bakery with her friend who is also her maid. And then one night at one of the kingdom's balls, a dark, mysterious character called Jest arrives and sort of turns Catherine's whole world upside down on its head. I really liked the character of Jest. In keeping with my kind of love of the darker characters at the moment, I really liked Jest, but I did find Catherine and Jest's relationship hard to understand. I'd expected it to be quite atmospheric and tense and kind of spine-tingly, and something about that just didn't quite connect for me either. So I think I gave it 3.5 stars on Goodreads. It was an interesting read, it was an enjoyable read, and I certainly still enjoyed Marissa Meyer's writing style and the characters that she created, but was just a little bit of a letdown for me, unfortunately. And it took me 2.5 weeks to read, which is like the longest time, and I think probably is what set me up for a bit of a reading fail in the month of December, because normally it would take me 2 or 3 days to read a book of this size, and 2 weeks was quite a long time. The next book that I read in the month of December was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix by J.K. Rowling. This is book number 5, and it is the biggest book of the 7 Harry Potter books. It's also, in my opinion, my least favourite book, and the book in which the least amount of action takes place, although this is the book where, spoiler alert, Voldemort comes back and is kind of, everyone in the Ministry of Magic sort of has to acknowledge that Voldemort is back. The action really takes place in the latter section of the book, and up till then it really is just Harry being angsty about the fact that nobody believes him that Voldemort is back, and that Dumbledore is ignoring him. It's Hermione and Ron falling out and arguing all the time, and there just really isn't that much action that takes place. I still gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I still love the whole Harry Potter series. I think for me this just is my least favourite book, and again I found it incredibly slow, and I found myself almost trudging through the storyline. Just, it wasn't what I needed to read at that time, I think. But I stuck with it and I read all 800 pages of it. Still thoroughly enjoyed it. Still going to pick up the next two, the final two, this year. But yeah, again, a bit of a for me. And then the final book that I read this month was Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the third and final book in the Mistborn trilogy, and I have yet to give this a rating on Goodreads because I'm yet to decide how I actually feel about this book. It is, I cannot eloquently explain all of the mixed feelings that I have for the way that Brandon Sanderson wrapped up this trilogy. Again, I feel like this is a book with a lot of character development and not a lot of action. There's a lot of plot, there's a lot of wrapping up of various strands and threads that have taken place throughout the other two books, but there's not a lot of action, so it felt like quite a slow read, and it felt like there wasn't a lot of momentum to keep me jumping back in to see what happened, other than wanting to know how he was going to tie up everything at the end. I didn't particularly like the way that he ended the book. I thought that it was very clever. I could recognise that it was very clever, that it was very neatly done, and I realised the reasons why he made the decisions that he made in writing the ending the way that he did, but I still don't like it. And I still just don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I acknowledge that it's really clever and I actually quite enjoyed it, and it was a very satisfactory ending in that there weren't really any question marks that were left, but on the other hand, it just wasn't at all what I wanted from the book. So I am yet to give this a rating. I'm sure that I will eventually give it a rating. I want to give it 5 out of 5 stars, but I'm still quite cross at Brandon Sanderson for the way that he chose to end this book. If you aren't familiar with the Mistborn books, they are adult high fantasy and they are set in a world with a magic system that revolves around the use of metals and alloys, and metals are ingested, and if you are able to use these metals, so if you have allomantic power, which not everybody does, then these metals can enhance some of your abilities, so they can make you stronger, or they can heighten your senses, or they can allow you to see into the future, and all these different kind of things. And it's a really, really interesting, in-depth, character-driven fantasy novel, and it's definitely one of my favourite fantasy trilogies. He is a very, very in-depth and clever writer. He does repeat quite a lot of information that he wants you to retain, which is kind of his way of shielding what is actually going on, and it is very clever. But there were some parts, particularly in this book, where there wasn't a lot of action to distract you. I did find it quite repetitive in places, and it felt like each time we went to visit a different character, we were just rehashing the same storyline over and over again, as he kind of dragged you through the story. So mixed feelings about this book. It was definitely a good book to finish the year on. I'm glad that I read it. I'm glad that I can now say that I finished this series, but it's going to take me a while to get over the way that Brandon Sanderson chose to end this book. So there you go, just 3 books for me in December. Hopefully January is going to be a better month. I've set myself, again, quite a steep TBR for the month, which I will upload and share with you sometime next week. Thank you for watching. As always, don't forget to give me the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you are interested in more videos, and I will see you all soon.